Good morning, everyone. We'll begin shortly. Ayan. While waiting for others to join, please make sure your microphones are muted and your cameras are turned on if possible.
And don't forget to prepare your questions for our question and answer sessions later. We'll officially start in just a few minutes.
Ayan, since we have 30 participants, a pleasant morning to everyone. We would like to thank you all for joining us in this meaningful forum as we explore how disinformation affects our society, from politics and history to science and health, and how we can respond with truth and awareness. Good morning once again, everyone. My name is Lorette Jean Balderamas, your fact girl for today.
And I am Mathiling Sangelo J. Desiring, your fact boy for today, and we are your host for today's forum entitled What the Fact? Building Institutional and Community Resilience to Disinformation.
Ayan. We have an exciting lineup of speakers today who'll be sharing their insights and inspiring us with relevant ideas later. But before we dive in, we have a few house rules for a smooth and productive session for everyone.
First one, be respectful. Let's make this space open where everyone can express their thoughts and opinions. Second, stay on mute. Please keep your microphones on mute unless otherwise requested. For the third one, reserve your questions. Please save your questions for the open forum at the end of every session. And lastly, stay on topic. Please keep your questions and comments relevant to our session to ensure a valuable discussion for everyone.
Ayan, to formally open our forum, we are honored to hear from our professor, Remy De Leon, the one who provided us with insights and dedication which have significantly contributed to the success of this forum. So Remy, please go ahead and let us give him a virtual round of applause, everybody. Yan.
All right. Good morning and thank you for being here, especially to Prof. Barcena and Attorney Acero. And thanks to the attendees and those who are joining us by listening to the recording or even reading the transcript, which should come out later. Our topic for today is disinformation, which is an established reality in Philippine culture. Although recently it has been magnified by technology and by the information economy. Um, the risks have grown with the rise of threats ranging from unintentional malinformation to state-sponsored malign influence operations. The interventions, however, that we hear about are either large-scale, involving governments and organizations, or individual involving media literacy. But we don't hear that much about interventions in our institutions and our uh, about interventions in our institutions and in our communities. And that's something that we hope to address with this forum today. Congrats to Project Hilda, which is rather aptly named. It's named after Hilda Cordero Fernando, whose life work places an emphasis on community and relationships and kapwa. We are definitely excited to hear our dear speakers' insights today. So, with that, let's listen to what smorgasbord of insight the team has prepared for us today. Thank you, and looking forward to a nice and enlightened discussion.
Yan.
Thank you so much for that very inspiring message, Professor De Leon, and for officially opening today's forum.
To begin our series of discussions, we will now hear from our first speaker, who will talk about how disinformation has influenced historical narratives, particularly during the martial law, a topic that remains vital in understanding truth and activity today.
Our first speaker is Attorney Francis Houston R. Acero, Vice President and Data Protection Officer at Meralco, and also the President and Representative of Democracy.net.ph.
Attorney Acero has been active in the data privacy space since 2013. He was the first Complaints and Investigation Division Chief of the National Privacy Commission and is part of the team that drafted the implementing rules and regulations of the Data Privacy Act of 2012. Attorney Acero is the master privacy trainer for the National Association of Data Protection Officers of the Philippines. He has been a member of the faculty of the Far Eastern University Institute of Law since 2014. Currently, he is the data privacy officer of the Manila Electric Company and its subsidiaries. He is also a founding director, and he is currently representing them today as the member and as the president of the board of trustees of democracy.net.ph. Let us give a virtual round of applause for Attorney Francis Houston Acero.
Hello, everyone. Uh, all right, let's get this show started. I'll share my screen. All right. So, I'll be talking about ways that we fight disinformation in general. So you have large-scale approaches, as Ram said, and you have individual interventions. Um, each one of these approaches. Now I only gave you a selection of what institutional interventions may look like. The thing is that no one's found a solution to this information yet. As much as we want to think that, you know, we have a handle on it, we really don't. Otherwise, you know, we wouldn't be having this discussion right now. Just a brief idea on what this information is and why we need to fight it. This information is a problem because it's untrue. By definition, it contains false or misleading information. That's the first step in fighting it, that you know that it does contain problematic statements. Not because of, that they're made, but because they're verifiably untrue. Second, this information is intentionally manufactured. So there is intent, there's direction behind it. You create, you present, and you disseminate this information. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it, right? So it's not just something that appears out of nowhere. And third, it's manipulative. There is either significant economic gain, or there's an attempt to, well, from our point of view, mislead the public. But their view might be that they're just shaping public discourse. One man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, and so on. But the difference here is that, again, if you go to the definition of disinformation is untrue. It's a problem, right? Why? Because it's an abuse of free speech. There are certain thinkers who think that even if it's untrue, it should still remain within the sphere of protected speech. That let the free market decide what is true and what isn't. That assumes that people have this idea and that they individually can determine the truth. But when how you determine the truth gets hijacked, then that's a problem. Why so? If you are betting on disinformation as a means to material gain, if you are a fraudster or someone who benefits from deception, then you rely specifically on the ability of disinformation to create a space where you can't the people who believe your disinformation will themselves protect your disinformation from being debunked. We're also seeing, and this is where my NGO is currently making an effort, foreign information manipulation and interference activities, where if foreign states and their agents, in pursuing their own foreign policy, uh, distort opinion on the ground without using political capital or military effort. Why force the other state into a situation that's disadvantageous to them if they can think themselves that it's advantageous to them, or they capitulate from within? There's a saying that lies spread many times faster than the truth. And in an age where people don't really have institutional safeguards anymore to determine what is the truth, this can be a big problem. So this information is something that social media algorithms promote. Why? Because this information is also based on fear and anger. It's based on things that manipulate your emotions. Now, there's a reason why there's more disinformation on one side of the political spectrum than the other, because, again, fear and anger is a conservative idea. No, the policies, the mindset of a conservative is based on fear. There are biological studies that show that the amygdala in people with conservative beliefs, in which they make decisions out of fear, is greater than in other political those with other political leanings. Now, if your social media is filled with speech that looks fear and anger, you like to have yourself validated by the speech that you hear. You don't want to be told that your fear is baseless. You don't want to be told that you're just making things up. So you naturally go to the people who validate you, make you good. That will make you stick onto social media, and particularly the channel that validates you and gives you that information. So if you look at our OFWs, why they're heavy, they have this cult of personality um that they've built around a certain political uh, uh, political person. That's where you get that. So it feeds on confirming your existing beliefs, wants, and desires. Earlier, Remy said that, this information was something that was used inside the first Marcos regime. Now, the first Marcos regime, before he got elected, uh, the Marcoses released, well, we say the Marcoses, but there was a biopic that was heavily flattering to Ferdinand Marcos Sr. that was released just before the 1965 election. And this helped solidify the myth of himself that he created, that he alone had the solution for the dysfunctional Philippines, that he alone could take the Philippines back, make the Philippines great again, he said. Does it sound familiar? Now, why did he say that? In 1915, the regime of Carlos P. Garcia ended. And Carlos P. Garcia was one of the most corrupt. Before Marcos, he was the most corrupt. There's this guy, his name is yeah, no, I want to say Harry Blackstone, but that's not his name. But
Stonehill.
there was this, huh?
Stonehill.
Then Stonehill, yeah, there you go. Harry Stonehill. He died just after EDSA in Forbes Park. But Chel Jokno's dad led a raid on his Forbes Park address. And in that raid, which was done without a warrant, they found multiple books that said, that contained, it was much like, in that, at that time, the infrastructure, the flood control projects, it was that big a scandal at that time because it's that most politicians, including Ferdinand Marcos, were on his payroll. So if you look at, where does Zaldico get his model, you can all look to Harry Stonehill. And then, because it was done without a warrant, the Supreme Court said that this was a good opportunity to bring the fruit of the poisonous tree. So at that time, because it was a warrant, all documents, and there were several trucks of it, were deemed inadmissible in court. After Stonehill, Dado Macapagal came to power. And after Garcia, Dado Macapagal came to power, that's when Pepe Jokno as I think, yeah, he was Secretary of Justice. He led that raid into Stonehill's Makati residence. The corruption of the Garcia administration is not something that we made up. There are communiques from the US State Department from that time saying that corruption was a big concern for the US government. So the political tension was thick when Dado Macapagal tried to take advantage of it for his own political interest. But that led to nothing. And so there was greater frustration. Here comes Ferdinand Marcos, who before that time was seen as the champion of the moderates. People think of Ferdinand Marcos as a conservative stalwart, but before that time, he was a liberal champion. He was part of the Liberal Party. It was only during the Marcos presidential run in 65 that Marcos and Ninoy Aquino swapped sides from nationalista to liberal. And then as now, they didn't really stand for anything. It was a personality, it was a cult of personality fight. And that cult of personality thrives on disinformation. So it's not new. It's not new. You can find examples going back to Ramses the Great. But then disinformation is targeted. But it does create effects. For example, Mark Antony, he was part of the triumvirate, Pompey, Octavian. Ah, no, Pompey, Julius Caesar. Yeah, Octavian. And himself. They were the triumvirate of Rome before Julius Caesar took power. He committed suicide after losing at the Battle of Actium because Cleopatra sent a rumor out. She committed suicide. So he committed suicide because they were lovers. People who people respond to fake news and make decisions based on fake news. And those decisions can be contrary to your own interest. But you see greater use of fake news among the first fascists. Hitler, you know, the guy in the middle, you may not. The guy in the middle is Generalissimo Franco. He won in the Spanish Civil War, and he was a fascist. He used the Catholic Church and this idea of Spanish nationhood to create a very brutal and repressive regime. Because he did that, Hitler didn't see him as a threat, and Spain's architecture and history were preserved in a way. But this doesn't mean that there wasn't internal genocide within Spain. There were just as many people. Well, not just as many people. There are a lot of people who died. Maybe close to 100. On the right, that's Benito Mussolini. Mussolini invented the term fascism. Their disinformation created the myth of the golden past, created the myth of them being the only people who were able to bring them back from the golden past. Does this sound familiar? We just went through this. We went through this with Marcos the first time. We went through it through Duterte, and Duterte has always been an avowed fan of the way Marcos used used the myth making, used state media to create that image. And it lasted. It lasted even up to the Duterte administration. It wasn't destroyed by succeeding administrations who wanted to bring out the truth. People themselves kept the myths alive. And until they felt it was safe for them to bring out those myths again as fact. So, okay. Goebbels, Hitler, you know what he did with the Jews. Mussolini, his internal myth making allowed him to have the public support the persecution of Mussolini's political enemies. And with Generalissimo Franco, there was a campaign of terror and repression. I think 40,000 people died in that particular campaign. This ended in 1936. This wasn't even at the war. Ernest Hemingway captured Franco's winning when he reported on the Spanish Civil War. So, now we know what it is. How do we fight it? The thing about disinformation and institutions is, for institutions, it's an existential threat. Part of the idea of fascism is that it wants to destroy those institutions that it deems inappropriate, or those of the old order. This includes institutions meant to serve as checks and balances, because the most important thing under fascism is obedience and unity. This idea that once you have unity in judiciary, the legislature, when no one stands in the way, you are on the way to progress. And if you're not, the one is going to complain. Now, when in the study of how people, ordinary people, first elected Hitler into power and then willfully participated in the killing of so many people, millions and millions of Jews, Hannah Arendt looked at what they were. And if you look at pictures of the Germans during the war, they're pictures of people having fun, normal people. But how did that happen? Because German culture is in love with the bureaucracy. So if there's this bureaucratic devotion, and says, I'm just doing my job. I was just a good civil servant. They're the elected power. I just follow the elected power. If you have someone who wants to use disinformation and deceit to get into power, they come into power, then they'll use the institutions that used to be checks and balances to then themselves inflict violence and brutality. Now, if you are trading in disinformation, you use that fear that uh, uh, the power that they do wield, and just create the lie that they have no checks and balances and that they are themselves persecuting you. Because in the past, institutions, especially here, have already been used. There's this saying, every conservative confession is every conservative accusation is a confession. I'm not saying that conservatives do this alone, but if you are trading in fear and anger and dismiss the institutions that are, ayun, madali. So, what can institutions do? What interventions can they do to preserve themselves? So what we've seen is, on the large scale, as Remy said, you have debunking, right? So you have you have labels, you have fact checkers, labels in terms of, no, and we'll discuss that more in a bit. But whatever kind of debunking you do, your mileage can vary. Whether or not it succeeds depends on so many factors. Are you able to push through and break through people's confirmation bias? Confirmation bias, you don't really look at evidence or proof that you're wrong, because people don't like to look at things that say they're wrong. If you are a swindler and a fraudster, or you want to take advantage of that, you will abuse that information. The other, it's a variation of the big lie, the illusory truth effect. So if you're repeatedly told something over and over and over again, you tend to believe it's true. Later we'll be talking about, the other speaker will talk about vaccines and disinformation, but uh, you know, it's very, especially in reproductive health. So I was part of that fight as well. And with reproductive health, uh, some of you are women here. There are so many myths on reproductive health that we, because they've been repeated through the generations, we just take them for granted to be true. But there have been studies that show that Filipinos are the most ignorant when it comes to reproductive health. What institutions can do also is you do pre-bunking. In pre-bunking, it's like treating the human mind as an organism. So we immunize ourselves against this information. There are two steps to this. First, she warned people that they can be manipulated. You show them, hey, you can be manipulated, and here's how. You can be manipulated by people who appeal to your emotions and to your anger. If that is the main argument that they're making, that you should be angry and move because you're angry, then you should watch out. But then people got angry because of the infrastructure shenanigans. Are they automatically bad? Second part is to guard against that. You expose them to a weakened form of misinformation. Something that's super absurd, but not that absurd that they'll dismiss it outright. Just enough to intrigue them. And then say, that's funny. What's a weakened form of disinformation? You can say that, people with white hair have multiple girlfriends and so on. Ganyan. It's not true. So you can laugh that straight out. How did this get discovered? There were Americans who, after the Korean War, decided to defect into China. And when analyzing why they were more vulnerable to brainwashing, there's this idea that they actually weren't more vulnerable to brainwashing. They were just exposed to that disinformation for the first time, and therefore they had no counter to it. In a study from Cambridge University, University of Bristol, and Google, using YouTube, those who were given a 90-second video that pre-bunked disinformation were 5 to 10% better at correctly identifying misinformation. That, in the larger sphere of things, barely moves the needle. Again, the problem with these things is it doesn't really teach people how to think. And so if ordinary information is filled with fallacies and logical traps and things that appeal to cognitive bias, there are so many biases that are out there. Voila, you're still going to fall victim to disinformation. The other problem with pre-bunking is that it focuses the action on individuals. So at democracy.net.ph and other civil society organizations use the Disarm Red framework from the Disarm Foundation to show a common language in demonstrating how disinformation spreads. And so if we just show that information, like, why are you doing this? No, why are you believing again, the pressures on the individual, the recipient of this information. Why do you believe someone who uses this kind of methodology to promote their ideas instead of just, having it threshed out in the open? That's not something that's no. It's not evidence. Sorry. It's not content based. It's evidence based. So, in democracy.net.ph, you put out the paper tracking two two particular instances of disinformation uh before the midterm elections, and the people who were no of a certain political persuasion who looked at it said that it was unfair because we didn't get the side of the people who authored the disinformation. And our response was, well, we're not really looking at the content of the disinformation. We're looking at the propagation method. There's no need to get a second opinion for observations that I make. Why do I have to get their side for an observation? It happened. However, as I said earlier, with even with the disarmed framework, there are information sources that are legit, that use the same techniques to propagate information, propagate useful information. So just because it fits the framework doesn't mean it's disinformation automatically. You still need to be able to look at whether it is in fact false information. So if you look at systems that where in Facebook, diba, if you post this information, there's a tag underneath, or in YouTube, there's a Gemini will say that this is this information, and you have to check and do further look at further things. There are counter messaging strategies. Yeah. There are truthful communications campaigns designed to engage people on a narrative and psychological level have been shown to be more effective than just presenting facts. So you don't just present counter facts. You have to create a story that makes people accept the facts. The thing is, the people receiving the facts as they are, we just end up viewing it as just competing stories. There's promise here, but this takes so much effort. So, I can't even begin to quantify how much money is involved to pick out the messenger, the medium, the theme, the style. Now, have they been effective? No, otherwise we're not here. There's a 2023 study on these techniques with evidence, no? And there's no silver bullet. None of these things on their own really move the needle. People don't know how to think. People don't really know how to discard information that's untrue. And the more that you think you can do it on your own, the easier you are to manipulate. If you yourself can be manipulated by people around you, by the people you choose to trust, more people who are intent on doing this to you. There's a in the early days of the dot-com boom, there's this, no, there's an app for that. Like, really? There's this temptation to just make a gadget, an app or a device or some software or this magic bullet. Implement it and bam, you're okay now. It doesn't work that way. So every single approach here tries to shift the burden to the individual user. So in response, and I can't emphasize how much a bad idea this is. Well, some of it is. There's this call for social media liability. Because the idea before that social media was going to be the answer, that social media platforms shouldn't be accountable for the speech made there, falls when the social media companies themselves create the conditions for disinformation to flourish. So for the search for liability, there's this idea that social media registration. The problem is, who watches the watchers? If you put social media registration, how makes you that different from North Korea? What if you report what is objectively the truth, but the social media registration watchers say that you're actually reporting an untruth? Whoever is in that social media body has the ability to shape the truth. No one's gonna agree to that. Again, because the opportunity for abuse is just so large. And there are others like from the romance of Bataan who want to put in social media liability for the companies, for the social media platforms. Who determines what? How do you establish jurisdiction? How do you establish the damages? Who do they pay? So as I was preparing this, I was looking at, last night and identity politics and all that. And you hear this information just taking over people, taking them in a cult of personality. Someone saying, I'm a DDS until my last breath. They can do anything, any form of misdeed, and they'll still be DDS. Cool too. It's a fight. It's a real fight. But we have to admit to ourselves that fighting this information is not an apolitical exercise. There are certain political persuasions that become unviable if they let this information stop. They rely on this information for their political survival. Sometimes it's really tempting to put shame on people. Have the day you voted for. But that doesn't work. Shaming them the way they shame you, because shame is their currency on the micro level, will not work. Why? Uh, One, they'll just withdraw. They'll just go and seek their own happy place where they can continue to believe whatever falsehoods they want to believe. when senior citizens are the target of swindlers and scammers, because if you feed them disinformation and they bite it, and then they lose a lot of money, they become so embarrassed they don't want to talk. And to people who say I told you so, they want to avoid that. They'd rather face the embarrassment of losing all their money alone. And shame just, it protects a certain group. So, but what happens when, you know, this whole thing thrives on fear and anger? If you shame them, that just increases the fear and anger. And you build up resentment. And then lalo lang silang magagalit sa'yo. Now, the next three, are part of the psychological controls for uh, people who are turned on by um, evangelical behavior. And I say evangelical uh, with a small e. So these are behaviors that we've seen with, even with organized religions and um, evangelical churches, especially. But the Abrahamic religions are prophetic in nature. So they rely on this word of mouth, they rely on prophets. What happens when you meet someone who's really annoying? You want to shame them, right? But that shame just creates this setting, this polarization of insiders and outsiders. Fascism, especially because it relies on this idea of them versus us. So if even if the majority is them, as long as we stick together, there's an us, we're okay. And if you be persecuted so bad, so it that persecution, real or imagined, creates this social reward for them. And then you shame them enough, they believe there's no way back to being normal. Dito na ako eh. Finally, no? So how do you do it on a personal level? How do you deprogram people from the cult? First, you create a safe space. You allow them to express their fears. Fears, how do fears disappear? You show them it's not true. You take them, you let them, you give them enough space to articulate what it is they're really afraid of. Then you present the contradictions from the people with the answers. Usually, the way they get these people is they say, I am the answer, or the answers to me are simple. Answers are never simple, especially when you have large level complexity. The modern world is complex. So you can see this also as a reaction against the complexities of modern life. It takes a lot of knowledge and information to be able to successfully navigate through life, and against the mindset that says, no, I want a simple path, a simple promise where I follow a religion, where I follow set rules for my society, then I'll be fine. That doesn't work. eventually that kind of thinking leads itself to contradictions. You show, don't tell the contradiction. Eventually, it's going to run into a few things. First is self-expression, because the idea is conformity and obedience, but people love to express themselves. It's hard to get to the second point where you can discredit the authority figure, because the cult of personality politics in the Philippines is so entrenched. When they tried to create a parliamentary system for the Philippines, they couldn't do it. A true parliamentary system where you have a prime minister who leads by consensus, you can't do it, because Filipino expectations are always for the leader to be this all-powerful deity. But if you give them enough space, let them explore their resentments, not only against but how they're being failed by the authority figure. Maybe, but that's the hardest nut to crack. If you give them enough empathy, though, and your empathy clashes with the in versus out that they have, maybe it's really hard to deprogram someone who's been programmed to not think for themselves. So, in closing, fear, hate, and anger, that's the currency of disinformation. That's learned behavior. To act out of fear, to act out of hate, to act when you're angry. There's a reason why you're not supposed to do it, because in your own personal lives, if you do it, that leads to disaster. You don't make the best decisions when you're angry. And you can't blame other people for those decisions. What is the opposite of fear, hate, and anger? It's empathy, it's kindness. Always be kind. Have empathy toward others. Thank you. That's it.
Ayan, thank you so much for those for your insightful talk, attorney. Ayan. And now, while we all have your attention, everyone, let us proceed to our next speakers. Now that we've explored how disinformation affects our view of the past, let's turn our attention to another equally important issue, which is medical disinformation. It is our pleasure to introduce the second speaker, Ms. Jean Francis Barcena, who will be sharing her insights on building community resilience against vaccine disinformation.
Is also the co-lead of the Social Innovation in Health Initiative Secretariat, a global network secretariat that is based in the National Institutes of Health and University of the Philippines, Manila. She has 9 years of experience in health communication, particularly in research dissemination and advocacy. Among her recent projects were the real-life study of Philippine Vaccine Effectiveness Project and ending HIV transmission by optimizing pre-exposure prophylaxis in East Asia. She currently teaches Speech 30 or Public Speaking and Persuasion at, of course, the University of the Philippines, the Liman Extension Program in Pampanga. Once again, let us all give her a warm round of applause as she shares her insights with us. Senior Lecturer Jean Francis Barcena.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Let me just pull up my presentation. Here we go. Sorry. All right, here we go. Okay, so good morning. While I have experience in correcting misinformation and strategizing against disinformation for health research projects, let me just give a disclaimer that I have not implemented a direct campaign against disinformation on vaccines. So I am coming in as a health communication specialist and researcher. And today I will be sharing a collection of strategies from published researches while also adding my personal insights as a communication scholar and practitioner. All right, so I think there was a bit of an introduction already about the difference of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, but let me also give a very, very quick uh, differentiation of the three. So misinformation is an intentional mistake, such as inaccurate photo captions, date statistics, translations, or when satire is taken seriously. And then there's disinformation, which is fabricated and deliberately manipulated audio or visual content. It is intentionally created, and this includes conspiracy theories or rumors. And then there's malinformation, which is a deliberate publication of private information for personal or corporate rather than public interest, such as revenge porn. So deliberate change of context, date, or time of genuine content. So although all of these apply to health communication, previous studies have focused on the first two, misinformation and disinformation. That's why I'm going to be touching on those. So why do we need to fight misinformation and disinformation? So in a study between February 1 and March 16, 2021, a sample of anti-vax content that was shared or posted on Facebook and Twitter showed that up to 65% of anti-vaccine content can be traced to 12 leading online anti-vaxxers. So this means that a large and coordinated effort by a few individuals shaped the anti-vaccination movement. So this study was spearheaded by and released by the Center for Countering Digital Hate, and it's a nonprofit organization. So where are they now? So one of those who belong to the dozen is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He is the current Department of Health and Human Services Secretary in the United States. So there's also another study that I found online, a published study that explores vaccine hesitancy in the Philippines. So it did content analysis of comments. Okay, so it investigates comments on national TV channel YouTube videos. So it investigates the discourse surrounding vaccine hesitancy in comments on YouTube videos announcing the COVID-19 vaccination campaign by the Philippines national TV channels on February. So two specific dates in February and March 2021. So they found out that those with negative attitude towards COVID-19 vaccination exhibited higher engagement levels than those supporting vaccination. So they are the ones who were expressing their opinions more. So there were 741 YouTube comments that were analyzed, where 80% exhibited vaccine hesitant related discourse. So this course types included negationists, so those who outright denied the efficacy or safety of vaccines. And there were institutional critics who expressed skepticism towards health authorities and vaccination programs. There were those who were preventive individuals who emphasized alternative health practices, and those who were focused on politics, meaning political ideologies and conspiracy theories. There were also those who were pharmaceutic critics who questioned the motives of pharmaceutical companies. And lastly, questioning individuals who sought information and clarification. Also, earlier this year, Meta announced that its fact-checking mechanisms will be reduced. So in this article by CNN, it says Meta is getting rid of fact-checkers. Zuckerberg acknowledged more harmful content will appear on the platforms now. So systems will now be focused on checking only for illegal and high-severity violations such as terrorism, child sexual exploitation, drugs, fraud, and scams. Other concerns will have to be reported by users before the company evaluates them. So it passes on the responsibility of fact-checking to the users. And you will also notice if you are actually reporting some posts on Meta, on Facebook, you will see that there is a shift. I think they've removed political the political false information, something like so false information that's related to politics is also removed already. So from the last time that I checked. So Meta follows the community standards of X right now. So that's the why. So based on several studies on combating misinformation and disinformation, they are suggesting, they are recommending, all these researchers are recommending that we take a shift from reactive debunking toward community engagement, social listening, and trusted messenger strategies. So from a one-way mechanism to two-way communication systems that encourage this. So how do we build resilience as a community? So resilience means three things here. Number one, the community can detect and slow disinformation spread through monitoring. So we detect. Number two, people have access to accurate, relevant, culturally appropriate information and trusted sources. So identifying the trusted pathways. And number three, social norms and institutions support vaccination decisions, and there's social reinforcement. So we say that a community has resilience when they are able to do these things. So first, they are able to detect, inform, and reinforce. The World Health Organization COVID-19 Global Risk Communication and Community Engagement Strategy, published in 2021, recommends that strategies need to be community-led and data-driven, collaborative, and it should reinforce capacity and local solutions. So here are some evidence-based strategies that are based on, sorry, that are based on previous health researches. So number one is active social listening and rapid response. Okay, wait. Okay. The community needs to monitor social media, community conversations. There's a need to monitor social media, community conversations, local radio, barangay meetings to detect rumors early. So, and then triage them by reach and potential harm, and then respond quickly with accurate local information. So Early detection prevents rumor amplification and lets responders tailor messages. So the WHO and CDC, Center for Disease Control, guides recommend social listening as core to managing infodemic. So again, active social listening. So there is a need to monitor and then respond right away. The second one is leverage trusted local messengers. Okay, so use people the community trusts. This can be the local health workers, religious leaders, teachers, community organizations, and vaccine recipients to deliver messages. So messaging is more persuasive when delivered by an in-group trusted voice. So the studies show that community-based organizations and trusted messengers improve vaccine confidence and uptake when they co-design and deliver messages. Number 3 is pre-bunking, and this was discussed a while ago already. So teach people, so in the context of vaccine disinformation, teach people to recognize common misinformation or disinformation tactics such as emotional manipulation, false experts, before they encounter false claims about these issues. So short pre-bunking messages reduce susceptibility. So psychological inoculation of pre-bunking has experimental support and is recommended as part of infodemic response. This is according to a study by The Lancet. Okay, fourth strategy is community engagement and participatory listening. So engage community members in two-way dialogue, not only one-way broadcasting. Collect concerns, treat them seriously, and co-design interventions. This builds ownership and trust. So community engagement interventions during COVID-19 increased trust and helped address local barriers to vaccination. So there are studies by BMJ Open and other reviews that show that participatory approaches are effective. And then lastly, make accurate messages practical, human, and repeatable. So people act on simple, concrete instructions. So such as where to go, what to bring, and then stories from peers and repeated short messages. So combine facts with practical steps and narratives from real community members. Reviews of vaccine communication strategies find that combining trusted messengers, practical information, and storytelling increases uptake more than facts alone. Okay, so so these are the lessons that we learned from studies. Now we will proceed to 3 case studies. Okay, the first one is a case study from Ghana. So, sorry, I can't see my screen. So, community engagement to counter fake news. Okay, so a 2025 study in 2 Ghanaian municipalities documented how coordinated community engagement, social listening, trusted grandmother spokespeople, and local radio dialogues improved vaccine acceptance during COVID-19. Actually, they are also incorporated when we talk about radio, it's not just talk, they also incorporated songs. So radio being still a primary a tool, a media tool for them. So the lessons from this include having local voices and listening, and that generic national messages alone weren't enough. So these have to be supplemented by messaging that's localized. So adapt messaging and messengers to local norms, use community forums and local media. Okay, and then let's go to the Philippines. There's another study that that can be used as an example. So there was a post-scare recovery work that was done. So there were 2 factors that influenced COVID-19 decision making in vaccination in the Philippines. So the first is there was that Dengvaxia vaccine controversy in the past, and then there's also there was also a COVID-19 brand hesitancy. So there were some um, brands that you wanted to uh, to have rather than the others, more than the others, because we think that they're more effective. So all of this figured in as challenges in the vaccination program. So these required rebuilding trust via transparent government communication, community dialogues, and partnerships with NGOs and local leaders. So research shows that rebuilding trust takes time and requires both institutional transparency and grassroots engagement. Rapid responses must be paired with long-term trust rebuilding. Consistent, honest engagement is non-negotiable. And then let's go to something that's close to the work that we do at the Social Innovation in Health Initiative. So identifying social innovations in health, good best practices and innovations around the world so that these can people can learn from them and they can also be mainstreamed or replicated. So in Brazil, there was an extramural, or I think this is still existing, extramural vaccination strategy for the homeless people. So, but this was this started in 2020. So in Brazil, there are 221,000 homeless people in 2021. So we don't know, there may be more now. And part of the problem that they had on vaccination, COVID-19 vaccination, was the lack of information on the vaccines and also the lack of access to basic services. Of course, they're homeless, they're in the streets, so they don't have access to basic social services. So the innovation included a multidisciplinary team with some having alcohol and drug abuse backgrounds and now appointed as program officers who delivered vaccination services between a certain time interval. I mean, a certain time that will actually cater specifically to the homeless. So 87.5% of the city's estimated homeless population was immunized because of this, all serve to be able to access the SCUS, or their unified health system, and many others benefiting from harm reduction, counseling, rehabilitation services, hygiene assistance, and administrative support to restore their citizenship status. So the factor attributed to the success of this program is not merely enhancing access to services, but delivering services in a humanizing and dignified way. And this also involved community engagement. They asked the community, how do you want us to provide this service for you? So let me just close with this photo from the last case study example. So resilience is not a one-off campaign. So it's a set of relationships and systems. It starts with listening, working with trusted local voices, pre-bunking proactively, and measuring simply. So there is also a need to measure at the end of it. If you actually were able to correct and you were able to send out or introduce the the um, good health seeking or health seeking or care seeking behavior that you would like them to adapt. If you take one thing away, prioritize trust over simply correcting facts. So yeah, so that is what works for health communication, specifically in the vaccination program. So here are some of my references. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that very informative and very meaningful discussion, Attorney Acero and Professor Barsena. It really teaches us how disinformation ruins us as an individual and as a community once these types of information builds up. However, of course, we want to give highlight to the strategies that was taught to us. There are tons of strategies on how we can combat disinformation. And of course, it is within us to look closely on how we can execute and implement this to our communities. So us and individuals can be a tool and a way to be able to create a community that can build resilience to this information. So at the end of the day, we can have a community where information are factual, are true, and of course disseminated effectively and efficiently. Now let's proceed to the question and answer portion to be facilitated by, of course, my partner Loretta Valderrama.
And we'll now proceed with our open forum for the second session and also the first. Ayan, if you have any questions or reactions about the presentation, feel free to send them through the chat box. And of course, kindly keep your questions short and relevant so we can address as many as possible within the time. Ayan. Ayan.
That's a good question. Um, the the legal standard for infringing free speech is whether there's a clear and present danger that the state has a right to protect against. That's all well and good. And but how do you protect against political speech? Um, there's no easy answer to that. Institutions are weak. Law enforcement is politicized. So for me, the answer might lie in civil liability. So if you're able to make them literally pay for this information, especially when it hits private individuals, and you make the process for that civil liability a lot faster. So in the States, they tried the same tactics to discredit Smartmatic. Smartmatic replied with a libel suit. In the States, libel is a civil offense. So nung natakot with the bill that could be like in the billions of dollars, Fox folded. Why do foreign nations bother to spread this in the Philippines? What do they stand to gain? Natural resources. For example, like the West Philippine Sea, right? What if there's a fifth column and we stop advocating for the rights to our exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea by saying, oh, we should just play patronage with China and just, sip-sip na lang tayo. That's better. Because that's what that's what we do anyway. Sip-sip na lang tayo. We just obey. Sila naman yung superpower ngayon. That's what you hear. Do they need to, like, it works for you because you're not even, you don't even consider that they're doing that for political capital. Or with anti-vax, no, like Dengvaxia. Dengvaxia actually met the WHO standards for vaccine efficiency. But compared to, this anti-China anything, they were able to sell it. It wasn't just no, they're able to sell the idea that Dengvaxia was just water. Uh, can government regulation stop disinformation without limiting free speech? Again, I really think because government regulations benefit the person in power, and the person in power has to be challenged. Free speech is what allowed us to see, I don't know, the infrastructure anomalies. But what if someone in power just said the infrastructure anomalies were just fake news? Ay, di tapos na yun, right? So, do you trust the watchers? No. So, if the system is built on distrust, actually, it's built on trust but verified. So, again, for me, the real reform should happen with civil liability. Kasi may tatamaan at tatamaan yan. So, if you're able to get people to pay for their misdeeds, that's faster. And for institutional actors, again, disinformation is coordinated. It's usually an institution also behind it. It's more effective. What legal reforms are needed to make elected officials accountable if they deliberately spread propaganda or disinformation? That's already in Republic Act number 6713, where dishonesty is an offense. What we need is the ombudsman to do its job. So if those officials are liable for no, they're found guilty of spreading this information, they should get kicked out of their jobs. The ombudsman exists for that to happen, but the ombudsman usually acts as a rear guard to protect the people in power. I don't think we do a good enough job of screening who the ombudsman is. I don't think we do good enough job with enforcing our rules that are meant to protect us. But you know, if patronage is the game of the day, and if we move away from patronage, people, especially those who have learned to game the system, and by that I mean our parents, specifically our parents, whoever your parents are, if they are, I've figured out that most parents at some point have done unethical things to get ahead. So most parents are guilty of this. So they've leveraged their knowledge of the system to benefit themselves, and they don't want any to change the way they've been able to benefit. Maybe because they think they pass on this know-how to their children so they have a better future. Okay, I think those are my questions.
Oh, there's a question. There's a question about Kapwa. Jean, do you want to take this or shall I?
Well, yeah, that you can add. But like I said,
Sorry.
yeah, it's okay. Yeah, so like I said, there is evidence that community engagement is the key to one of the biggest keys actually to combating disinformation. And yeah, our sense of kapwa can be really tapped as Filipinos. So um, doing something like getting their inputs, co-creating solutions, co-creating messages that will address disinformation or misinformation, then yeah. So I think that would be, yeah, crucial in making sure that good or correct and accurate health information is out there. You can add, Rim.
Yeah. So CAPWA is both a mechanism and a context within which information flows, and building trust within that context is an important part of, you know, of fighting disinformation, as Jean pointed out. So, not that she hasn't said that, but I just wanted to put emphasis on the aspect of trust, and that the trust element in Kapwa is very important, and it's very powerful. And actually, it's a perhaps a way to make sure that this happens, that this information is fought. If the people who are trusted within the community can be reached, then it's possible to reach the rest of the community that way. So yeah, Kapwa is very important to disinformation, to fighting disinformation in the Philippine context specifically, and perhaps it's something we can export, something to do more research on in the future.
Ayan, and we also have a question from Bea Rakisha Taylan from AP1B, addressed to Prof. Bersena. And ang question na po is, it was mentioned that Meta is removing their fact checkers, which makes me wonder, what are the most common signs that an online post or article may be spreading disinformation? And how can we encourage our peers to think more critically before sharing content online?
Okay. So wait, before I answer it, let me also answer a previous question asked about why is the Philippines, why are some foreigners spreading misinformation or disinformation in the Philippines? If you've seen The Big Hack, you can check it out, The Big Hack. It's a documentary where it shows that the Philippines is a testing ground for corporate um, PR firms. So they're trying to see, because the Philippines is chronically online. And so we are a very good testing ground for anything, um, for any kind of campaign that they want to uh, release. So yeah, so check it out, The Big Hack. Okay, so answering the question, so um, when you see a post that you think is unbelievable or surprising, then check the source. So see if it's a legitimate source. And then also check the content, the actual content. So aside from checking the source, seeing if it's a legitimate URL, where it's coming from, so who is speaking. So check the content. So is it a clickbait, or is it does it make sense? So like just follow your common sense, see if when was it published? Was it something that was just revived from many years ago and something that does not apply today? So see if it's up to date. Also, ask yourself about the purpose of the content. Is it um, communicating bias? So again, who is the speaker? Who is releasing this information? Where is that person standing based on a particular issue? And then lastly, check with external sources first. So see if you can use Snopes or factcheck.org to check if a certain information is um, correct or accurate. So here's also a personal um, rule that I do for myself. So don't share anything that you have not actually read. So if it's just a link or it is just a few words or summary or just a caption, don't share it if you haven't read the whole thing just yet. So read it first so that you don't contribute to any further misinformation or disinformation. Read it first and check if, it contains all the legitimate and verifiable facts, and then go share it if you think that it's okay for sharing. So, yeah, I guess those are very basic.
Thank you so much again to our participants and to our dear speakers. If you have other questions, you may directly send it to our speakers and to Professor De Leon so they can also answer it directly and privately. So at this point, of course, we would like to present a certificate of appreciation to our speakers as token of gratitude for sharing their time, expertise, and valuable perspective with us this morning. So first, the certificate of appreciation is presented to Attorney Francis Houston R. Acero for generously sharing his time, knowledge, and expertise as a guest speaker during the online forum, What the Fact? Building Institutional and Community Resistance to Disinformation, held on the 28th of October, 2025, signed by yours truly, and of course, Assistant Professor Yemi De Leon. And next is the certificate of appreciation is presented to senior lecturer Jean Francis A. Barcena for generously sharing her time, knowledge, and expertise as guest speaker during the online forum of the fact, building institutional and community resistance to disinformation held on 28th of October 2025, signed by again yours truly and Assistant Professor Yemi De Leon. And lastly, of course, Certificate of Appreciation is presented to Assistant Professor Yeme De Leon in grateful recognition of your guidance, support, and mentorship throughout the planning and execution of our online forum held this October 28, 2025. Signed by yours truly. And lastly, the Certificate of Appreciation is presented to the University of the Philippines Salaman Extension Program in Pampanga and Olongapo Student Council in sincere appreciation of your valuable partnership and unwavering support. Your collaboration and commitment have greatly contributed to the success of our online forum, What the Fact? The Building Institutional and Community Resistance to Disinformation, held this 28th of October 2025. Signed by yours truly and Assistant Professor Yemi De Leon.
Ayan, today has been a remarkable journey of learning and collaboration. To commemorate this event, we'd love to capture the moment of the event with everyone here. May we kindly ask all participants to turn on your cameras for our group photo opportunity. Let's take a few seconds for everyone to settle in, guys. Magsuklay na munang buhok and put your best smiles on so we can capture this moment. And then, of course, let's do our official hand sign for our forum. Fact! Ayan. Ayan. Okay na?
And as we come to the end of our forum, we would like to express our heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for spending your morning with us. Your presence and engagement made this event truly and so meaningful. And of course, I would also like to thank the minds behind this amazing forum. I would like to present you the Project Hilda, of course, yours truly, and Loretta J. and Balderramos, your host for today, Enrico Lumbang, Lelaine Crizel Kiambao, Maria Rowena Lin San Juan, Abby Pabustana Gala, Jerome Chloe Cosca, Jean Clarin Zapanta, Rain Kyla Gopez, and Paolo de la Cruz.
Yeah, let's carry forward the lessons and insights shared today as we continue promoting truth, critical thinking, and collective responsibility in building resilient and informed communities. Once again, thank you to our distinguished speakers for your time and dedication today, Attorney Acero and Miss Arsena, and to everyone who helped to make this event possible.
This officially concludes our policy forum, What the Fact, Building Institutional and Community Resistance to Disinformation.
And thank you, everyone, and have a safe and meaningful day ahead.
Thank you, everyone,
Thank
and
you po.
congratulations to the team.
Thank you.
Thank you po so much to our speakers and attorney.